Please feel free to come up to the table. Let's have an intimate conversation. The advantage of being a later session is that hopefully we've gotten to know one another better and we're on hugging terms now and not just kissing terms. Which means, at least my hope is that we would actually get to ask honest and tough questions that would really, hopefully, move the needle on the conversation of gender gap. The second advantage of being a later session is that all of you would have had the opportunity to benefit from a lot of information. So I'm going to do my part by not adding to the information overload and indigestion. So hopefully this session, we're going to spend a bit of time consolidating and crystallizing some of the learnings that we have benefited from and really try to expand our imagination, expand our vocabulary, and again, and I'm going to say this a few times today, let's really have the courage to say what we really want to say, not what people expect us to say. This is about gender gap, right? So let's not play to the rules, and really ask good questions. So in order for us to do that, I would like to begin by setting a slightly different tone from, I think, what some of you may be expecting from a gender gap conversation, which is to acknowledge the many men and women who have worked very hard to make this reality today possible, for which I am very grateful for, right? And in order to do that, for today, I would like to ask us to really listen, perhaps like we've not listened before during this session. A lot of these big, heavy, sexy topics have become so commoditized that we assume we know what people are going to say. So just for the next 45 minutes, I really want to invite you to listen in a very different way, not just with your ears, but also with your heart. And if you want to go one step further, try to ask yourself, what is motivating this person when he or she shares their opinion, okay? The very last thing is to share a little bit about the preparation that we have done for this session. We really want, because we've all come here, for some of us it hasn't been that close, it's quite far to travel. We really want to make this a concrete session. So I've also invited the panelists to not just share their personal stories, because I think we have to move away from numbers. Numbers are important, but we have to make this topic real. We have to humanize this topic, and they will be sharing their personal stories, and they will also be putting forward a call to action. So let's not spend too much time talking, which is important. We also have to be doing. And I also invite all of you to do that. So on that note, I would like to start with my panelist on the left, a beautiful lady in red. Her name shall be mysteriously revealed. No, she's Rekha. I do remember. So I think it would be fair to say that you were at the cusp in India when this whole topic about female empowerment and gender gap really started becoming fashionable, right? So in your capacity as the director for the All India Management Association, which is a pan-Indian organization. So tell us a little bit about what that's been like.
Okay. While I was waiting for the session to start, Rosalina and I had a chat, and I'm going to tell you what I told her, and she said I should share that with you. As far as gender discrimination and gender parity is concerned, I've not had that in India at all. I've not experienced it. But I've learned a lot from my life, my personal story. I was born in a middle-class family. My parents, I have a brother. My parents gave both of us very good education. We were treated completely alike in the family. We both went to the same school. In school, we both studied. There were other young men and women studying there. Passed out of school, went to college, passed out of college. Again, it was a co-ed college, one of the best colleges in Delhi. Started working. The first time I think I heard about gender discrimination was in my third job. I was working for the National Industry Association in India. I had a very tough boss. He definitely had, he didn't discriminate at all between men and women because as a woman, I was handling trade fairs, exhibitions, and working till 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, traveling at moment's notice. So there was no, all my life, I really faced no discrimination. There was an opportunity given and an opportunity taken. I joined the present job of mine about 10 years back. I head the All India Management Association. I took over from a Major General. It was an organization which had never had a woman heading it. I have all male colleagues who are reporting to me. And to top it all, my board is made up of CEOs of different companies. And as you would have it, most of them are men. And here I am, 10 years later, sitting with you, saying that I have not been discriminated against, which is true. But what have I learned through all my journeys? One, very important that mindsets need to be changed. Very important that family, your parents' mindsets need to be changed because I think it all starts with the family. The feeling of discrimination, this feeling of disparity comes with perhaps Indian families and perhaps other Asian families treating boys differently from girls. They feel that the girl will get married, go away, no point investing in her. Let's give a better education to the boy. He will be there, he'll look after us in our old age. Some wish, I would say. Not many do that these days, but still, that's the way they think. What worked for me was that my parents didn't think like that. They treated us as equals. Going to school, we were all treated as equals. We were all, praised on whether we achieved something or not. College was the same. Joining a job, having a boss who didn't he didn't care a damn whether I was a woman or not. There was work to be done, and I had to do it. So all these helped me to reach the position I have. Going a little further, I'm also now on the boards of some listed companies in India. I'm an independent director. This would have been something which I never would have thought would be possible for someone like me, even though I head an organization, a national organization, because being on the board has always been an all-boys club. But I think the government of India here took a decision. I think India is one of the few developing countries which have got reservation. You need to have one woman director on the boards. That gave me an opportunity. I'm not asking for you to have me on the board if I'm not qualified for it. But even though I'm qualified, it's such an all-boys club. Normally, a woman would not be considered for the position. But because of this new rule, we were. Okay, I need to finish now. So I think my story is a positive one, and the lessons learned from it, and some of the causes which perhaps could lead to gender discrimination. Thank you.
So thank you, Rekha. The reason I wanted to start with her story is because I think one of the big challenge of having this kind of conversation is that we only want to hear the sob stories. We want to hear the vanilla stories because it feeds the anger and the pain. So while I believe, and you've also made it very clear, it's not that there is no gender gap, that it's not that there's no discrimination, but we also have to equally give space and to learn from examples that have worked if we truly want to create a very balanced view and not spend all our time in the things that haven't worked, right? So with that, I want to just kind of have you guys guess, because I know this is like the post-lunch comatose event. It's a little bit hot in this room. 2017, the Gender Gap Report, 144 countries from the World Bank. Which position do you think India had? What was India's ranking? So for those of you who thought between 1 and 50, India ranks between 1 and 50 out of 144 countries. Put up your hand. Okay, 51 to 100. Okay, 100 to between the 101 and 144. The majority is correct. So, what is the number? India ranked 108 in 2017, and 10 years ago, 2006, there were 98. So you're going to start seeing a pattern as I give you this number every time I introduce a panelist. So with that, I want to move to Vietnam. Ms. Le. Now, I think it would not be an understatement to say that it has not been an easy thing to be the founder of a company that has lasted almost 20 years now, right? Yeah. So tell us your story and make this real for us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Le Pham. I live in Ho Chi Minh City with my husband and 2 daughters, beautiful ladies. I set up my own company in HR services and outsourcing 18 years ago. We have more than 10,000 headcounts working all over the country in different fields on commercial channel, in production lines, as well as in the back offices for clients, and most of them are multinational companies. I started the business at the age of 30. I don't think that is a young age at that time at all. And I think the age for ladies in Vietnam to start their business nowadays is even younger. Many of the startup owners that I've been mentored can be 25 years old. I mean, my story about gender gap is my own observation and also my own story. Whenever I shook hands with a new acquaintance talking about my status, they ask me how many kids I have, 2, boys or girls. I say daughters. They say, oh, will you have a 3rd one? I ask why. Because you may need another a son, a boy in the family. And then all the others who have 2 daughters will say that, oh, the daughters know where the neck of their fathers is. And all the guys and ladies who have 2 daughters will say, but you guys and women who have 2 sons in the family will have a heavier load. Why? Because the mindset says that if you have 2 sons, their career later, the investment into their studies and all the responsibilities that the parents put into themselves will be much bigger and higher than the families with 2 daughters. And that's the story you can see in the street nowadays. It is not the old time at all. But suddenly, people will see that Vietnamese women are contributing 72% into the labor force. And many of my friends in the women business associations are owning their business, running the business for the family, and they work very well. But in fact, many of them choose to step back and stand at the 2nd position in the company rather than the 1st one. either their brothers or their husband will be the one to take the lead or go roadshow. So it's a kind of a glass ceiling for business women in Vietnam, and I mean, I witnessed that we used to have more more women in the public sector than nowadays. And I've just read an article saying that less and less women in Vietnam are taking a higher position on the hierarchy. That's bad because we didn't improve. Recently we go flat or even did it worse. And my own story was when I were about 38, and I was in interview with my GM, general manager of a European company. I was at the position of sales and marketing director, and we're supposed to get one manager to report to me on the sales side, and everything was okay. And the last question my managing director asked him was whether he is willing to report to a woman, and his answer was no, on the spot. So he went out filling the interview, and that's it. You mean Vietnamese women are very proactive in business, in career, but we faced with the glass ceiling. That's my story.
So I'm quite confident that the glass ceiling concept is well known to everybody. So thank you for raising that. I'm just curious, has anybody heard of the concept of the glass cliff? Okay. So the glass cliff theory goes like this. When a company is in trouble, you get a woman to be the leader, not a man. Right? So if the company tanks, of course, it was a woman, what do you expect? I'm oversimplifying a very complex research, but it's actually very interesting that first we had the glass slipper, then we had the glass ceiling, now we have the glass cliff. I'm not sure what the fourth glass is going to be in a few years. So I'm saying, what about no glass? Let's do a little bit of smashing. And on the note of smashing, I'm very pleased to introduce, you will notice, we have Mr. Lee, John, who I did get his permission to say this, a self-professed crazy Korean who loves to go around town on a bicycle, which if anybody's been to Korea is not the dancing. You gotta be crazy to be doing this. So with that, you have been doing some pretty amazing work in the sector of finance and investment. Tell us.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here to share my experience. Also, I like to learn from the participant that how you deal with a lot of issues regarding the gender gap. I'm particularly, my background is a portfolio manager for 25 years. And investing in Korean companies, particularly, I think that this is very, very critical as an investor because Korea is faced with many challenges, like aging society, and the growth engine is now slowing down. So, like a gender issue is not something nice to have, like a gender gap. This is critical from my perspective that we need help from different ideas and different angle, and this gender issue is as an investor something that I value very important. We talked about the ranking and the gender gap. In India, I think that Korea is far below than India. In the Korean female, they don't have any discrimination in terms of education. Many girls go to good schools, and we have more lawyers, female lawyers, and we have more teachers, female teachers than men. But in corporate world, the female workers are very, very discriminated. That in entry level, we have more female workers, but going up that the glass ceiling is a big issue. They cannot be promoted. They're not equally treated by the management. Actually, less than 2% is board members, the female board members out of total board members. So Korea is kind of a very bottom of the list. So there are a lot of legally the Korean government is trying to do something about it, and it takes time. And the Parliament is trying to pass a law that make it mandatory to have like a 20% or 30% board members should be female. But there is a strong opposition from the obviously that not only in Korea but in all over the places there is a strong opposition to the mandatory the ruling or anything else. So I decided that as an investor that there's something take us other avenue that we launched a fund we called Marries the Woman Fund, the first fund in Korea. That we are going to raise money from the public. This is a mutual fund, and we like to show the Korean people, not only Korean people but also to the world, that having more women in decision making, the positions, that assuming that everything is equal, that I think that the company will have higher ROE. And market capitalization will be much better off than the company which don't have any female in high position. That's what I believe. So we launched the fund, and it's just less than a month ago, and we raised about $1 million for now. So hopefully that we can raise more money from the public, so that I like to make it real changes in corporate world. Thank you.
So, John, I don't know if you actually read the report that I read, but you are right. Korea is the bottom, at least for the countries represented. So, Korea is 118 out of 144. 10 years ago, you were at 93. So, Vietnam, you're at 69. So, actually not too bad. I thought you would be a little bit worse. But I think, John, what I really am amazed about what you're doing, apart from the fact that it's in Korea, is that you're actually using this mutual fund as an opportunity to create conversations, right?
Yeah. That actually Korean media become very, very interested in covering this issue. That's one of my purpose to launch this fund. But at the same time, that people don't believe that there's some suspicion that actually can we make money out of this? Okay, female board members, let's say, more female board members. So what's difference? Actually, you're better off having more female. But that's what I believe. That corporate governance, having more women, there will be definitely more. Corporate governance will be better off. I don't see, there's many Korean management people go to jail for embezzlement or for bad conduct, but I don't see any female members go to jail. So that's one indication. And I think more diverse opinion is very, very important in terms of running the company, and different opinions and different aspects, different contributions. It's just very, very needed. In particularly Korea, it's very, the historically male-dominant society. They don't think different things. So I think the female contribution is very, very critical to the success of the companies.
So from Rekha's point about changing mindset at homes and in school, you're changing mindsets in the banks. So given that Korea, home of K-pop, maybe in 10 years we're going to have a reality TV on how you're training the bankers to sell this mutual fund. Okay. So let's swim across the ocean, and we're going to come to Japan. So I want to say thank you for really flying in, Ryoko, because she had to replace one of our panelists Takizawa at the very last minute with the typhoon and all. So thank you very much for making it. So from banking, we're now going to move into healthcare. And you're going to share a pretty scandalous incident with us to illustrate this whole story.
Thank you for Rosina having me here. And let me introduce a little bit. I'm Miyoko Takizawa. I'm a medical doctor working in Hanoi right now. But I graduated and worked in Japan for 10 years, 5 years, and moved to other states, working there a couple years, and came back and working there in Japan and moved to Vietnam last year. So. From that experience, I feel like some of differences between the countries. But today, I'm going to introduce some example of gender gap in Japan, especially in healthcare sector. Recently, back in this August, we had a nationwide scandal that revealed systemic gender discrimination by medical school. Tokyo Medical University, one of the prestigious medical school in Tokyo, that had been that they officially admitted they had been manipulated female entrance exam score 20% decreased to reduce female student and also increase male student because school authority professors believe that the women doctor cannot work longer hours. Also, they tend to leave medical profession after marriage and childbirth. So that is kind of true because as a lay, I'm married and I have 2 daughters, and it's kind of I went through everything. So it's kind of very difficult to keep my career at the medical world. To work at the hospital, seeing a patient 24 hours, 7 days, and call the hospital at night and in the weekend. It's kind of impossible to keep my profession. So, but since then, back in after this scandal, Ministry of Education in Japan investigated all medical schools in Japan, and as all of our medical school has around less 30%, around 30% of female medical students, other than like male medical students at 70%. So, so far, 3 medical schools admitted that they marked down female entrance exam score, and they want more female medical students. So after this scandal, people, of course, protested and get together and in front of the school against this systemic gender discrimination. And also legal action took place, and some request compensation, some request application fee reimbursement, and some requested just their true exam scores. So still, as you may know or not, Japan is still lowest ranked country in terms of gender equality, and also a number of the percentage of female doctors is lowest ranked among OECD countries, about 20%. So the reason I was thinking, I have been seeking, because Mr. Lee mentioned the same as he mentioned, the less than 10% of medical school professors, like a department of head, are female. So the decision-making process, we don't have many female professors. That is also one of the reasons. And also second reason is so less lack of social support. And so today I would like to discuss or listen your story or from you and from audience how to resolve or how we can learn, we go ahead to this gender gap, reducing gender gap.
Thank you very much. And I think what I found really stunning about this whole scandal is the online survey that followed afterwards, whereby at least the participants who filled out the survey agreed with the university's decision to manipulate the scores so as to ensure that there are more men in the medical system in Japan, right? So that's pretty deep, I would say.
Pretty deep, and also among our colleagues and also my husband, also kind of me understand because not so many women cannot work as male physicians. So it's the reason the universities and the hospital need more male doctors. They can work longer. They can work whatever they want. They wanted. Whatever they were asked.
So instead of working on the human capital, we decided to just keep the horrendous hours that medical doctors are going through and still insist they deliver excellent care. I'm not sure about you, I find it a little bit troubling. So not quite. Japan is actually doing slightly better than Korea. You're at 114, just 4 points ahead of Korea. We're now going to visit our very last panelist, Myanmar. So before we jump in, the participatory part, do you think Myanmar performed better than Vietnam or not? Just a reminder, Vietnam is at 69 out of 144. No. Okay. Who is a yes? Who says yes? Okay. I wish I had drum rolls. I don't. I have a bell only. Myanmar is at 83. Yeah, so you're still ahead of Vietnam. Okay. So welcome, Rose. I have to say, so as an investor, I'm still very inspired by how much gumption you have, because I think Rose is so far one of the only females who wants to invest in an infrastructure project. But currently she's in media and in education. From healthcare, we move to media and education.
My name is Rose Hui. I actually currently now involved in marketing, advertising, media agencies. And also I have a school business, two businesses I'm running, aside from my family, making a beautiful family, and I have my little son. Like Rosalind mentioned, I helping society, community. I'm helping my fellow women, and also I give my time to my government. I'm helping the two regions in Myanmar as a responsible citizen. When I went to rural areas, I found that there are so many things to do, so many areas to improve. Yes, I'm in advertising media, but now that my interest is going into the power grid and building poles and transportation hubs and like that, because of the needs of the country. And also that the power, why I wanted to do the mini power grid is that I want to give lights in the rural area, so that I believe that there will be less issues for women who live in villages and the rural areas. Where I am now is in media in a city area, and dealing with international clients and dealing with international affiliate companies. So the quite sophisticated, I would say, so that the women in my day-to-day society and never experience those issues is like who live in a rural area. I was lucky that I lived in a city area so that I never experienced discrimination. But when you talk about discrimination, maybe the definition of discrimination and the level of discrimination as well. Whoever discriminated me, and I never take it serious. And what I feel like is that makes me stronger. That pushed me go a little bit farther. That I always think that way. And I even share my experience with Rosalind that sometimes when I talk to the officials or the higher ranked men, and they, of course, a few years ago, that they didn't want to talk to me. They asked my father they asked me to bring my father, and or otherwise then they didn't look at my face. They didn't look into my eyes when they talk. So that's in a sophisticated city area. In a rural area, women are much below. So I thought that if we could give enough lights in those areas, women can work better and their life safer. And also, not only women, the people's life will be better in those areas. That's the reason that I wanted to get into that area, the venture. But that's very challenging as a woman because I don't know anything about engineering or building or electricity. But can learn, I guess. But men normally very dominant in those areas. And also to do business in that area, it's only men. How I could crack in, how I could get in is quite challenge. So this is the challenge that I experienced as a woman.
So thank you for that. I think what Rose's story illustrates, and then we're going to open it up to the floor and spend about 30 minutes just really having a conversation. There was a research done which very interestingly illustrates, granted it was resumes and interviewing for corporate jobs, but they found that when a man looks at a CV with a job description, if they can do 30% of the things on the job description, they say, I'm the perfect candidate for this. The woman, however, will focus on the 30% which they cannot do and will not go for the job, right? A bit simplistic, but this is a good segue for me to really open this conversation. We started off with stories, and I think stories are really critical, even to this day, even with the fatigue that I think a lot of us are experiencing with this topic, because your story is true to you as the story of a woman in the village, the story of a woman who is either glass ceiling or glass slipper or glass cliff is true to that person. So I want to just open this up and ask all of you either to contribute your fatigue, your frustration, your question is like, what is it that we are talking about, not talking about, that we should stop, we should do more? If you have a question for the panelists, please mention their name. And I love this, I just learned this in this session. Please declare yourself, say who you are. Any questions?
Hello, my name is Simon Lovegrove from a company called M Health, so I'm involved in healthcare. I live in London, and we have another issue. We have 160 plus nationalities living in London. And the gender issue is partially caused by nationality, so that you get people who are coming in from other countries who are expecting to have a greater gender equality than they had in their own country and find themselves not getting it when they arrive in England. And one of the reasons they don't get it is not because people are against the gender, but because they may be against the culture of another country. It's accepting the culture. And one of the questions that when you all come from different countries, my thing is that culture is very important. When I go to Qatar, for example, and I go into a restaurant, I would be lucky to see 15% of people in that restaurant being women. When I go into a restaurant in London, I would expect to see 60+% of the women, of the people in the restaurant being women. And so it's cultural, it's a dynamic. In my industry in healthcare, women have a way of being actually really much better than men, because they have that quality which some of us don't have. So I don't see gender gap as being a sort of platform issue. I see it as being an issue all over the place, and it's not really related to any one single thing. And that's really my thought.
Okay. That's a very great, difficult question/comment to start with. Which panelists feel up to it?
I'm interested to hear that 60% of women in the restaurants in London, and they when in Myanmar, if only one woman go to the restaurants and have your meal alone, and people may look like, what you doing here? Are you a good woman, or are you like, you know, they will have men will have a lot of questions. So it's totally different culture. Culture is different, I think.
I'm not sure I agree with you that it's cultural, because if you look at even countries like the United States, there are only 5% of women in leadership positions in Fortune 500 companies. And I think it's an issue which is across the board. Cultures certainly add to it. Cultures will give you little or more opportunity. But I think, personally, I feel it's an issue which is not restricted to Asia, but is there in the United States. Europe has done better. I think countries, the Nordic countries like Iceland, Scandinavian countries, they have done better. I think they have got close to 40% of the women on their boards. But there has been government intervention, and I think that has helped them to create that parity. I certainly feel Europe is doing much better, but even countries like United States are no better than perhaps us Asian countries.
I agree with you that the point goes deep to the culture itself of each region or each country. The point is that whether the woman in that specific country or in that culture would like to decrease, to step back, or they want to go ahead without equal opportunity. Because from my viewpoint, so many women in Vietnam, they decide to stay at home, take care of the kids, and they're happy with that. That's their own choice. But we should offer them the equal opportunity for the study, for the job, to start a career from the family as a social cell. I have several discussions with my colleagues, expats and Vietnamese and male colleagues about it. And they do think that women do have choice, but that is their choice. but why in that specific culture, and whether we have a kind of sophisticated survey to see whether women in that area really want to sacrifice their advancement or not. I don't think that women in any country want to sacrifice their chance or opportunities, but whether they do have the equal one.
So I think this raises, oh, sorry.
I want to add because of healthcare sector, because we have research which sex doctor is better or not. The American, I think Harvard published the female doctor is better in terms of returning rate to the hospital. And also, I think I agree because we female doctor are taking care of patient, also taking care of family. So we do more like comprehensive care. So I just add some more comment about which female and male doctor which you want to choose. That is a research question I remember.
So, oh, John, please.
I like to add one point that I agree that different culture has a different way of treating females, but as an investor, I don't want to see that so much talent is being wasted. That the female workers, they have very high education, but my example, I spend most of my time working for American company, but I came back to Korea and now running Korean company. One big difference is the Korean company, they don't want to have a female employee to be the boss of the male. They have strong opposition, but I simply changed that based on merits. Who is better quality, who is working harder than others. I made some changes, and there's a good example that is the performance has been improved significantly because of having more female workers in decision-making position. So there's one thing that I like to emphasize, that don't waste so good talent simply because they're female. That's my feeling. So having that culture, make changes, having more female in decision-making position will be much better off.
So here is perhaps one provocative question. So let's see if we can heat up. So in the world of business, if you want to make money, profit, you either increase your revenue or you drop your cost. So if we want to get more females into the economic realm of society, perhaps we should equally give men the opportunity to not work and stay at home. This would be the dropping cost side, right? So I kind of want to shift the focus a little bit. Let's not just keep talking about women. There's the other half of the population, which are men. What do the men think? Do you think that will work? Affirmative action in the other direction, not to increase board numbers? What do you guys think?
We in Britain have entertained or are entertaining the idea of legislation to try and make the gender gap less. It's creating enormous amount of resistance, more by women than by men, because it places women in a position where they have a right. And what is happening is that they deserve what they deserve, but they don't necessarily deserve it because the law says they deserve it. And therefore, this is a fight that is beginning to happen in the UK now. I don't know how serious it is, but we have some pretty strong feminist groups, and those feminist groups tend to be their own worst enemies.
Hi, my name is Grace Abandar. I'm from Indonesia. In Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, in the malls right now, we have like almost 200 more or less 200 malls only in Jakarta area. So perhaps more than 50–60% of the people coming to the malls are women. And now the management of the malls, give special parking area, ladies parking area. The thing is, whether we see this as an appreciation of, the management give privilege to the ladies, or this is actually, this is actually something that is not good. The thing is, if we have the privilege, because ladies, we like wearing, we like high heels, right? So if we drive, it is nice if we get like, if we get the parking area closest to the mall, right? So we don't have to, walk from far away to the mall. It is, this is the fact. If we really want to be the same or similar to men, don't complain. Because if we wear high heels, it is our choice. So don't complain if we have to, walk. Why should we be given the special parking area? So it is like, sometimes if it is the privilege, we just enjoy. But if it is like, something that is not good for us, we complain. So it is like, we don't want to be given the, we don't want to be called weak, but in certain area, we enjoy being weak. So it is like, we have to be consistent. If you feel that high heels are killing us, don't wear heels to the mall. Just use sneakers, right? So it is like, once I'm the CEO of a holding company, and one subsidiary is, organizing company. So we organize summit, conferences, trade exhibitions. And the operations staff, usually men. Because like physical, they are stronger, they can work longer hours like that without having many complaints if it happens to ladies staff. So the thing is, me as the CEO, sometimes for me, if I want to choose ladies, they complain. They complain if if I ask them to do the same, exactly the same things like their male colleagues.
So great. I think you've successfully riled out the hornet's nest. So please, you have a comment you would like to make.
Good afternoon. I'm from Vietnam. I'm working for ActionAid International Vietnam. It's an NGO. Yeah, we have more than 25 years working in Vietnam and in women's rights issue. So it's quite interesting to join this discussion. I will go directly to your comment on the distance of the car park that you say. If I understand you right, you said that women should still enjoy that priorities for them, and but it means that we are not consistent when we keep asking for the fair treatment, right? Is that right? So, but in my point of view, because in ActionAid Vietnam and in ActionAid International, we working on with the governments, and we are working on the public services, and we reaching to the gender responsive public services. It means that we understand that physically, the women and the men differently. Yeah. So, and of course, the women is weaker than the men, and they still need some special condition to have the fair development compared with the men. So, it's the reason why we are asking for special treatment for the women, so that they will have a fair chance to develop with the men. Yeah. So that, and from my point of view, I do not think that we just enjoy that, we do not request that special treatment, and really appreciate that. But we're still asking for another chance, another fair treatment, and another priority, so that we can have a better development compared with the men. And now we'll come back to our discussion. We know that Vietnam at the quite high rate of the gender, right? So in our point of view, the women rights issue in Vietnam is now, I think, is deeper, and it's harder to be seen like the other country, because in Vietnam we have no longer serious issue like the domestic violence, or the baby girls do not allowed to go to school. We do not have so much issue like that, but more seriously, we talking about the participatory, about the awareness of their roles in the family, in the societies, and in a higher level in general in decision-making process. So that if you know more about some regulation of Vietnam, we have the minimum amount of the women in the team leaders. But the thing that we care is not only they being there, but we care about how their voice being taken care of, how they are heard. Yes, so that is the issue. So I think that if we look into the women's rights issue and the gender issue, it's not looking how the women go freely, if they can go, whether they can go to the coffee shop, where they can go shopping, but how they're feeling, how their choice, and they are independently to give the choice. That's my point of view. And the thing that we care about is that, and now we have the project related to the anti-sexual harassment of the women in textile government and textile company, so that we try to work with the corporate leaders to ask for their special care about the way their policy, how it will support the women to protect themselves, to aware of their right, and the company should have some policy to protect the women to against that, because they do not have to scare of something to speak out their own problem. Yeah. Okay. So I think that if we being here as some CEO of the corporate, I'll still wish to have your commitment. And because you are a woman, and sometimes you are a man, but you care about the gender issue, it means that you care about the special treatment, about special policy that to support the women to have the fair chance to develop. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the contribution. I like your viewpoint very much, and I don't think that women and men should be the same. I enjoy dresses rather than just pants. and men should have different hobbies than women. That make the life more fun, right? Anyhow, I mean, in the social life and career, if we can give both genders good open opportunities, can be both okay. And I don't think that to imply a quota to the percentage of women in the board or the number of men in the board is good, because for business, as myself in HR, we would have the best performer at the right position rather than just men or women.
So from Grace's comment, is it customer satisfaction or is it reverse discrimination? We're moving to affirmative action. I think, Rekha, you have something interesting to say about affirmative action.
Yeah, I can give my own example here, or the example of India. We have talked about women joining boards. About 4 years back, I think there were 3% of Indian women who were part of various company boards. The government came in with this policy, which I mentioned earlier, and now it's compulsory for every listed company to have at least one woman member on the board. As the All India Management Association, we organize a lot of events, and I've been part of events where we have talked about women issues. There have been a lot of discussion on this policy of the government. There has been a lot of reaction from many women who actually are on very good positions and perhaps in different boards, where they have strongly said that we don't need this reservation. We should be judged on our work. Women don't need anybody to do them favors and have reservations. However, I feel that they are forgetting that they're already there. They've already made that mark. The mindsets in India are still very much different. I mean, there are very few women who get those chances. Being on a board is an all-men's club normally. They don't like to have women there because, as someone mentioned, women bring in empathy, they bring in good corporate governance, and sorry to say, a lot of boards are not really interested in that. They're more interested in numbers. This policy of the government has given women an opportunity. I would say reservation, an unending reservation is not good. Nothing should be forever. But reservation for some time, for a few years, for women to get on to different boards, for men to get used to them, is very important, because ultimately they will be judged by their work. You do need to have one woman on the board, but if she is not performing, she is not doing what she's supposed to do, she will be replaced. But the opportunity it brings for a woman, say in a country like India, is immense. And I don't think any woman or any man should just say that, oh, we don't need that. Yes, you do need that. There are many competent women who don't get that opportunity, who have not got this opportunity in the past. And I think it's only because this policy of the governments has come in that many more women are being recognized for their work. So that was my take on reservations.
So, John, I would actually like to ask you, and I'd like to really open this part of the discussion to deep thinking. There is a very seductive theory out there right now that says that gender diversity increases profit, revenue, good for economic growth. So my question to John, I know you are a supporter of that, which is why you started the mutual fund, but are there any suggestions where this is actually not necessarily true, but the more important question is, do we really need an excuse that is going to make money before we will put more women on boards? I'm just focusing on boards, right? I know there's bottom of the pyramid issues here, but I don't see anybody from that sector of society. So let's just talk about what we know. So John, give us a hopefully provocative answer, which will rouse out the second hornet's nest, and let's have a conversation.
There are many studies that proving that more accommodating companies for female their workers performing better in the stock prices obviously in the longer term. My personal experience that the running a Korean company, as I said, very male dominant. and very bureaucratic, and the female workers don't have anything much to say in terms of managing the company. And I realized that especially in marketing, especially my company, the marketing area, the female workers are much better than the men. I found out why. Because the female workers, when they're selling the product, they talk about the product. They have more knowledge about the selling point, and when they reject it, they take it not necessarily personally. But the men, maybe it doesn't apply to other countries, but in Korea, when they the marketing, they hang out with the male bonding thing. They go to school together and they drink together. So many times they're less knowledgeable than female workers. So I replace with the female, and we have much more revenue. I think that can, not necessarily, I cannot generalize my experience, but I found that many times that the female workers are very capable. Why? Because they bring in different flavor, different thinking. That's why diversification is so important. There's a risk control, different ideas. So I think eventually they will help making the company better.
Hi, I am Anit and I am from India. So I had a couple of perspectives to add to this. So this is one of those topics that I've seen that we've had a lot of dialogue over the past few years, but very little action, right? And the first step towards acknowledging or fixing anything is to acknowledge it. Now, if we see over the past few years, Asia is contributing to at least 60% of the global economic growth. And if we look at the other end of the spectrum, we are, lagging behind in the gender gap ratio. You would probably believe that the halo effect of rising economic growth will rub off on the gender ratio as well, but that's not the case, right? So while I think we'll have a lot of policy measures that we need to enact to have more women in corporate, and it'll probably take its own sweet time. What would probably help and fasten this whole thing is probably look at other sectors. So I like to quote two personal examples. One is I've been working for Amazon for the last 5 years in India, and we've seen a lot of women entrepreneurs coming and doing exceedingly well. And I like to take an example of one such brand called Tide Ribbons. This is a woman who's been working with local village farmers and getting home accessories made, and she's made a big brand, has now also won the Stanford Startup League contest. So I think e-commerce also is one such aspect where we could, because contribution to GDP should not only come through women participating in corporate organizations, but from women entrepreneurship as well. And also I think stories work really well both in India and in Asian countries, and I'm really proud to have my wife sitting here as well with me. She's also a panelist here, and I'm not saying this just because it has happened, but it's a matter of immense pride for me that she's matched me step by step and also bettered me in a lot of scenarios, right? So I think we also need to introspect as men that are we actually acknowledging the issue in the first place and fixing it? So those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you actually raised a very good segue. I would like to, this is the last part before we bring it back to the panel and get into the let's do something. Do you think we're being fair to men in this whole gender gap discussion? Are we being fair to the men in this gender gap discussion? Because there's been some talk about, men are actually going through an identity crisis as well. Very, very general, there's a lot of factors, but how does that sound? Is there a resounding yes?
No, I would actually just go back a few years, and when I was graduating from my business school, I feel that what happens is that in an attempt to bring women forward, somewhere that breeds a certain amount of insecurity in men, especially when women are capable, talented, and already doing so well. So I would take at least as a personal example, as ma'am out there pointed out, I really never had to face any gender discrimination. In the sense, my family has been extremely supportive. I have worked in an environment where my bosses have never really discriminated men, women. And now that I am married, so has my husband has been supportive. But what I feel is that sometimes because there are these policies and there are certain measures where, let's say when companies come to recruit, sometimes there is a part where companies would have quotas, like I want 2 women candidate, and if I'm recruiting 5 men, then there needs to be 2 women. Or even business schools have like 2% women quota, etc. So when you get there, 2 things happen. I think for men, they start believing that so there is this one thing that they are not getting adequate opportunity because there are women who would take up these positions, that's one. Sometimes it also goes against, in a way that sometimes when women are actually putting in the same kind of effort, they are dismissed or things are trivialized, saying that because there is a quota system or there is a certain amount of reservation for them to move forward. So we are trying to push them, so we are becoming the bigger person. So both things play, and I don't know that what exactly, I'm not the best person to say what exactly needs to be done to bridge that gap, but yeah, I think there is a slight bit of negative flashback to this phenomena also.
Okay, so it feeds into your comment about the feminist being their worst enemy, their own worst enemy. So to close, so the panelists had some time to think about this last question. What do you believe, if there's only one thing that you could do that will reap the greatest return to close the gender gap, what would that one thing be?
I think education, really from schools onwards, and family mindsets. I think that would really be an important part in closing the gender gap.
Yeah, I say the same, that continue to educate people that men or women, they are different, but they have to be treated fair, the same. And the reason I launched the fund is that to make it happen faster, but that actually the actions needed. We talked about this gender issue many years, but people don't change. So we actually are trying to prove that closing the gap will benefiting everyone. So that's education.
Yes, education is important, but I think like social norm, we got to break the social norm. It is fine for men to stay home. It is fine for women to go and work. And it is fine that women should not feel guilty that they don't look after their parents nor their children, stay at home and go out and work. So that for me, that coming from the Myanmar, and I think social norm, break the social norm is important for us.
Hmm.
So as you mentioned, education is important. Also, like not only girls but also boys. Boys need to support women in the future. And also one more thing I want to add is the place women cannot work happily is a place I believe male cannot don't want to work happily. So to be sustainable or reducing sustainable workplace, we still need to create more. We need to improve our working condition or working style. That is my thought.
I totally agree that education is very important, but it should be conducted on the basis of legislation, but the government actions to really push forward for the equality.
So if any one of you have suggestions for this, because I don't think this is a trivial question, please do raise your voice. I would actually like to suggest that Bollywood and K-pop, it's time for them to actually do something serious. And we should really have more examples like Grace, like the one that you raised, because I think we have to force the conversation in the most absurd way before something will become fashionable and people will actually tweet about it. If we continue to have this, it's fantastic, but it's got to get a little bit saucier than what we're doing right now. So Bollywood, whoever has connections, K-pop, and please encourage the Indonesian, conglomerate to do all this. What would you call it? Consumer satisfaction or reverse discrimination? Okay. Is there any suggestions that verges on the provocative and the absurd? Because we really do need to move the needle, because the ranking that I shared with you, not a single country represented by the panelists actually improved. It has decreased by anything between 4 points to over 20 points. The only country that held constant in that 10 years is, drumroll, Singapore at 65. 11 years ago, it's still 65 in 2017. No, went down. The highest score in Singapore is actually the Philippines. The Philippines, you want to know what they're at? 2017, they were at number 10. It's still a double digit though, so we've got some work to do. So ASEAN has actually regressed significantly in the gender gap, and this is not because there are more countries that are surveying. So if we want to lead geopolitically, economically, I think we need to be a little bit, and I'm using this word very intentionally, saucier when it comes to the affirmative actions that we want to take, right? Take it out of the boardroom and into the shopping malls. I'm sure we'll have more action. In high heels. Okay. Does anybody have anything saucy to add to the conversation?
My name is Akiko Kinoshita Waiker. I'm from Japan, and I'm also the governor of Zanta International. Zanta's purpose is to empowering women through service and advocacy, and we have about 30,000 members all over the world, about 1,000 in Japan. And by listening to all the conversations, and what I have learned through Zanta activities is that more women should be participating in the lawmaking field, especially in Japan. All those old men leading LDP groups, as long as they are there, things still continue to be more difficult. I'm also a member of the cabinet consulting members of the promoting women's issues, and I meet various men in that meeting also, saying that women are not responsible. And I said, what do you mean? I own a company. If women don't take responsibilities, there's no women companies. But that's the strong belief that all Japanese men have. And in order to change that society feeling, I think we need more women politicians in every field.
So one of the takeaways we got to be sure is written down in black and white is, apart from a high heel revolution in Jakarta malls, we need a revolution in the Japanese legal system. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have the last fantastic session, and let this be inspiring in some small ways or big. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you.